although the Chinese government accused the United Kingdom of interfering whenever we raise Hong Kong, the reality is we have a legal obligation as well as a desire to try and help the people of Hong Kong because of the nature of the treaty. But we are not naive. We recognize that the United Kingdom by itself will only have limited influence on China. They will have some influence, but we're not by ourselves likely to be able to make them change their mind. It makes sense for the United Kingdom to take the lead in coordinating an international response. And that international response can come, as it has done in part, from other governments, alongside the British government, the United States, France, Germany, countries hopefully in Asia as well. It comes in the form of the G20, but also it comes in the form of wider public opinion. And it's alerting the wider international community to what is happening. And we were delighted and surprised the speed with which we got so many former foreign ministers, senior ministers, prime ministers, other senior political figures, ambassadors, and others from a whole host of countries whose historic with Hong Kong are obviously far less than ours. So we know that all authoritarian governments, not just the Chinese, same applies to Putin's Russia, they pretend that they can ignore public opinion from the rest of the world. In fact, they take a great deal of notice of it. And we hope that the cumulative effect will persuade Xi Jinping that whatever his aspirations in Hong Kong, China, the government he leads, will lose more than it will gain if they continue with their current course of action. What the Chinese government and Xi Jinping has to realize, of course, that it's not just their policy on Hong Kong that is disturbing the rest of the world and making them lose friends at an alarming rate, because on top of that, you have the way in which they have alienated their own immediate neighbors around the South China Sea, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, Philippines, by their policy of militarization of the islands. On top of that, there is the aggressive rhetoric on Taiwan. It is very, very significant that people with the United Nations background, who are not politicians, they are people whose job it is to represent the United Nations values, appear to be coming together to express these views. And that is very powerful. Now, will it be possible to take action in the UN itself? That's going to be much more difficult because of the Chinese veto in the Security Council. So anything that requires approval of the Security Council will be blocked. For the last couple of years, the crisis in Hong Kong was basically between Hong Kong and Carrie Lam, or Hong Kong and China. It was a local dispute, albeit the rest of the world was interested. What is already happening now is the dispute has become internationalized. It is now an international dispute with governments that have no direct involvement in Hong Kong, not just the British government, which does have a direct involvement because of our history, but many other governments now expressing strong views and people with a UN background doing so, and so forth. Now, that is, from the Chinese government's point of view, that is a disaster. That's the last thing they could have wanted. And yet it's going to get, from their point of view, much worse. Because this is all happening before they've tried to actually apply this new law. Imagine what the reaction is going to be if they start trying to extradite